I had to look into the mirror. It's like, well, where am I not aligned?
Yeah.
Where am I not expressing my truth?
Welcome to the Alive and Aligned podcast, a show dedicated to helping you live a life of truth and share your fullest gifts with the world. I'm your host, Pete Byrne, and I'm here to open your mind to new perspectives, to introduce you to some epic humans who are already out there living their deepest truth. So now just grounding in, taking a breath, letting go of anything you're still holding onto from today, and just opening up to receiving this episode now. Let's dive on in. Sascha Haert is a coach, a consultant, an ex-pro basketball player, the co-owner of Yogilab, and the host of the Undressed podcast. But most importantly, he's a man committed to living a life of radical truth. Having fostered strong values and communication skills from his time in professional sport and a rather unique childhood upbringing experience, he is now very passionate about helping others fully express themselves and really about having the tough conversations that some people don't want to have. In this episode, we explore what is the secret to confidence and what is the power of speaking truth, and why Sascha believes it's essential to be able to look at and assess our lives objectively. Why Sascha loves to provoke people, particularly on his new Undressed podcast. What is the balance between living in the moment and building for the future? What are some key lessons that Sascha has learned from playing professional basketball? And interestingly enough, the main differences that myself and Sascha have noticed between working with male and female clients. And finally then, on the topic of his edgy podcast, we explore some of the ethics around romantic relating and how childhood patterning can affect how we show up in relationships. I really hope you enjoy this episode, guys. Let's dive on in. Mr. Sascha, welcome to the Alive and Aligned podcast. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, really good, man. Thank you.
You just made the journey up from Uluwatu.
Actually, from Ubud.
Aha.
Yeah, we had our podcast in Ubud. So I went to Ubud from Uluwatu, and now next morning, now I'm here with you.
Doing the
Look at these beautiful blue eyes. You know?
These lights help a lot. You recently started a podcast as well, eh?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. What's been happening there?
So I had the idea to bring men and women together to discuss all these things that we usually don't really discuss in the open. The things that we love about each other, the things that annoy us, the things that frustrate us, the things that we don't understand and wish we would get a little bit, more grip on. And so it's me plus 3 men and 3 women.
Yeah.
And then like one provocative type topic and really like explore it in depth. And like
Cool.
no coaching, superficial bullshit.
Yeah.
Just like real, raw, honest conversations and opinions.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah, called Undressed podcast for anyone who's
Undressed?
curious. Undressed.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Keep an eye out.
Yeah.
After you listen to this episode. Finish this episode
Yeah,
first.
that's way more important right now.
So yeah, we can come back to that, and I like the idea of provocative topics. I'd love to explore
Yeah.
some of them later.
For sure.
But maybe for the folks at home, you could just explain a little bit about who you are and what you do in like 2 minutes. The elevator pitch.
Okay, the elevator pitch. Who am I? My name is Sascha. I'm just another human being like anyone else here in this
Doing
world.
your best, yeah.
I was raised in a very beautiful way and also in a historically very special time.
Yeah.
Coming from east of Berlin. So I was born in communism.
Wow.
But then like when I was 2, the wall came down and all of a sudden like specifically the people from the East who were so restricted and restrained,
Yes.
they wanted to be as open, as creative, as liberal as you can possibly imagine. And that's the type of energy that I grew up in, where a country was divided and got back into union. That's why Berlin has a pretty wild, creative nightlife as well.
Totally, yeah.
And then played professional basketball when I was younger, junior national team, the whole shebang. Had an amazing life set up, but still there was this void. And then I'm coming to Bali every single year, like for months, take my whole holiday. And then sooner or later I was like, you know what, let me move to Bali. And yeah, now like a lot of things have changed. A lot of new businesses have been developed and built.
Sure,
and now I'm here.
Yeah. And how long ago did you move to Bali officially?
It's about 8 years ago, almost 8 years, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so for a little while.
And what are the main kind of, we'll say, professions or business ideas? How do you put food on the table?
Personal development industry.
Yeah. So
I have
not coaching. Coaching, but not coaching.
Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but it's this funny thing. I don't know how you feel about this, but this word, this label of a coach,
Sure.
for some reason it doesn't sit quite right with me.
Totally.
But that's the easiest way to describe what I do.
For sure.
And then with Yogilab, we have a personal development business and online business that focuses a lot on meditation and breathwork and like, you know, a few other things.
Yes.
So yeah.
It's funny you say it because like, so I'm trained in a style of breathwork, which is like specific around body work and repatterning the nervous system.
Yeah.
And when I say breathwork to people, they already have all their ideas of what it is. I tried that. It was 100 people in a big like festival. I'm like, a little bit different. It's like very intimate one-on-one work. You know what I mean? So I totally get that. And also with the idea of coach, it is funny how it's kind of like the same when we have like a nationality where maybe people have an opinion about a certain group of people and say like, oh, all that country, they're all like Irish. Oh, you're all alcoholics. Yeah. I'm like, some people.
You are though, right?
Well, you're German, so you're always on time, yeah?
I am.
Yeah.
I actually am.
You're living up to that stereotype, at least.
I do.
That's fair. No,
it's a thing with like respect to me.
Sure.
The way I was raised is like if you don't give someone like the respect of time and valuing their time as much as we value ours, then I think we're doing not only them but ourselves a huge disfavor. You know. So yeah, I find it extremely disrespectful, and if I'm late for whatever kind of reasons, even though if it's just 5 minutes, I let them know in advance.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. It's interesting because for me, like, okay, question, right? Why do you think some people are late? Is it because they're disrespectful?
Bad time management.
Yeah.
Long values and principles and priorities.
Yeah.
And literally not valuing the other person's time and presence.
Sure.
You know, and maybe not even consciously valuing it. It's like a subconscious inconsideration, which is still an inconsideration. So, you know.
Totally. So, like, it's funny because I used to have a real issue with time management, particularly like going through school. I would always be like the guy who's like just in on time or late. Yeah. And even afterwards, that really, you know, and obviously living in Bali, that can sometimes have a shadow that reemerges, you know, being... And for me, what I noticed, like when I was really exploring these parts of myself, was there was a part of me that it was almost like felt rebellious, but it was nothing to do with the other person. It was like against the idea of like not being in control. Even if I made a commitment, there was this part that would come alive and would say, fuck that. I want to do what I want. I want to, you know, spend more time doing my thing instead of needing to go, you know what I mean? And it was almost like this internal, battle with myself that would create these, and it was like these situations, and it was only when I would like observe that behavior time and time again of like, oh, why is it that I keep turning up late, or why did I used to do that? Okay, it's actually nothing to do with that person, like, oh, fuck that guy, you know. And it's also nothing to do with like, of course, like, you know, bad times, but I think the values and the principle underneath, like, obviously it's a very important thing for you, and like maybe as a person, like someone who is very strict on time management, and like the values that's been instilled into you because of that is like, I'm a bad person almost if I'm late, you know. I'm not respectful. You know, what kind of person isn't respectful? Who would do that? What kind of bad person would do that, you know? Is that true? Or
in some ways, I wouldn't say it this way, but yes, that's kind of what it is, because if you think about it, being on time is such an easy thing. If you really think about it, like it's the most simple time management skills that we all need. Sure. Right? And if this is all I need to do in order to show someone respect, why the hell wouldn't I? Yeah. You know? Yeah. So. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It's a whole other rabbit hole. I love it. That. It's nice. We're getting off a good foot. So you're in the personal development industry. What generally does that look like? Who generally turns up on your doorstep, and how do you support them? Yeah, so 2 different kinds of avatars. One, 80% of my clients are females still. Often they come to me, entrepreneurs, business owners, executives, managers. For some reason, I just very quickly ended up in that kind of bracket. And it often, surprisingly to me, with women, it comes back to confidence and communication. Confidence within themselves, which can be, or this insecurity can be expressed in their relationships, not only romantic, but family, but business, but colleagues and staff, and you know, all these different ways where there's this lack of confidence and how to handle this properly comes up. Sometimes it's like the performance, the mental performance and the mindset, and like, you know, having a little bit more of a peak in that area. Or the other piece is literally communication. Again, with all the same family, friends, partners, sisters, whatever, like, you know, and there's a lot of insecurity, surprisingly, even though women love to communicate, but it really comes down to like, let's have this conversation, let's have a serious conversation and bring up these challenging things, then more often than not, it's not done in the way how it actually would satisfy them.
Sure. And they're kind of linked in a way, because in order to have the tough conversations, you need some confidence.
Yeah.
So what is the secret to confidence?
Truth.
Truth.
Yes. I think it's truth. If you understand to be a seeker of truth and live in alignment with truth and speak your truth, then even though you might not know the consequences that are going to happen because of it, if you believe, well, the universe, God, like whatever you want to call it, is going to provide and support me if I'm just in alignment with truth, then nothing is really going to happen to you.
I fucking love that, man. That's great. Like, I haven't, like, you know, there's been many explorations around that, but to hear it in that way, it is really, it's an outsourcing of trust to something bigger.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, even if me doing this, it's almost like I'm going to put all my money on this horse or on this chip, you know, and even if it all goes wrong, at least I went out with a bang, you know?
And actually, it cannot go wrong, because if you look back at it 10 years in the future, it's like, well, I don't know, like maybe I made a mistake. You can always come back to it's like, no, this was my truth at that time.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything wrong, you know, because I really checked in with myself. Is it right to break up with this partner, or like get out of this divorce, or like start this business, or end this business partnership or whatever?
Yeah.
You can always come back to it's like, no, everything that I did is, everything that I said to you is like, that's in alignment with like what I truly believe in. It's in line with my values, and therefore it's like really aligned with truth. And what is truth? Truth is love and God, you know?
Yeah. And how do we know that we're living or speaking from truth?
You do know, right?
Do I?
I mean, we all know, you know?
But what if I don't know? What if I'm stuck in some pattern or some like fear from my childhood?
Well, then you know, like that's the case. So then it's like the path of getting out of it is a totally different one. Yeah. But the first one is like acknowledging the fact that there is some pattern, there is some like behavior that is not really the way how you want to show up in the world. Yeah. So then it comes back to, it's like truth and clarity, right? Here's what I think. The more we understand to look at criticism and failures and like anything that happens in our life, and we're able to properly assess and bring that awareness to like just looking at it a little bit more objectively, then we're stepping more and more towards truth, because all of a sudden I'm like closer to reality. You know, rather than moving away from it because I want to deny that piece of myself, or I don't want to have that conversation, even though I know I need to have that conversation. Yes. You know, it's like I'm either moving towards truth or moving away from truth. And I know when I'm moving away or towards truth. Yeah. We know, you know. Yeah. It's like this, we can fool ourselves, but deep down inside, there's no question we know. Yeah. You know when you're in a partnership, in a relationship, and you kind of should not be in that. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. So why do people stay in that partnership or in that job?
Comfort.
Yeah.
Comfort, lack of confidence, the insecurity, fear of the big unknown, what's going to happen and whatnot. Yeah. But that big fear of the unknown, like it kind of evaporates as soon as you believe, okay, if I'm walking in alignment with truth, if I'm walking in alignment with like what's really aligned and alive for me, you know, then I can't go wrong. Yeah. Like how am I supposed to go wrong with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, we wrote this musical, myself and my friend Danny, last year. Okay. And it's called Conscious Musical, but there's a song in it. It's like a personal development musical, and it's a song. I'll just play it for you. You can't go wrong when you follow your heart. You'll only get the lessons you need. You just won't lose when you're speaking your truth. So let go of your fears and believe. You might think that it's crazy and you're gonna get hurt, but the lessons that you're learning will be really so worth it, cause you can't go wrong. So listen to your heart and believe. Pretty much.
Nice one. Yes, it's true.
So it's that idea of being able to tune into that deeper intuition or knowing, or God or whatever you want to call it, and having the trust to actually follow that against all the survival fears. They're saying, no.
And that's so challenging, right?
Sure.
Because we all find ourselves like leaning towards the comfort and leaning towards like the thing that is a little bit more easy and that gives us a little bit more security or whatnot. But then I feel like we're losing that security within because, again, we're moving away from that intuition, that instinct.
Yeah. My story is that a lot of people in the world may be different now because you've got a lot more people that are following the personal development path. And with that comes a deeper seeking of truth, you know, and desire to live from that place. And that is ultimately where I believe fulfillment lies. But I believe a lot of people are still stuck in jobs and in relationships and situations that even though they might know something's not right, they stay with it because, as you said, of comfort or just not knowing another way, and even scared to follow or look even for another, because even to admit that there might be something that they're doing wrong and to really look at that opens the door that maybe they have to let everything crumble and fall apart. You know, and who am I without my job and my partner and this life I've created? So it usually ends up being pain or some form of like dark night of the soul that pushes people into that kind of an experience where they have no choice but to follow truth. Did you ever have a moment like that or an experience like that?
I think one when I moved to Bali, even though I had this picture frame type life, I had to realize, I mean, I had this beautiful model type girlfriend, you know, this amazing family, my basketball team, like everything was set up. You know, and people looked at me, how the hell can you even like think about moving? That's crazy. But I had to realize and I had to accept the fact there's still a void. You know, even though it seemed to like, I'm good, everything is fine. I was like, no, deep down inside I wasn't. I knew there's more to life. I knew like I wanted to live somewhere else. I wanted to live in a different culture, country, and like explore myself on much, much deeper levels, which I felt like I can't do where I'm at right now.
And so moving to Bali, tell me about that. What was the dark night?
The dark night in Bali, well, you know, definitely my darkest night in Bali was when I got a phone call from my mom 2.5 years ago, and she said, well, Dad had a stroke. And I was like, okay. And I told you before, I had this beautiful childhood, you know, he's such a big, powerful role model in my life. Like, and then within 3 days, I had to figure out a way how to get home. But like, you know, before I even was home, he already passed away. Because I couldn't, like, it was pandemic, didn't have my passport. There's a bunch of obstacles that were in the way for me to actually get home like as fast as I can. So like, you know, the moment when, there was a moment my mom calls me crying the next day and was like, I don't know why, but I just left the hospital and he asked me to come back. And when she said that, I knew, because I know him so well, I knew that he knows he's going to pass away. Because like he would have never asked her to come back if she just left. You know, I just knew him way too well for this. And then I sent him a voice message and basically said, you know, all the beautiful things of like how grateful I am and everything that he's done for me, how he showed up for me and whatnot, and all these 33 beautiful years that I had with him. And told him like, look, I know like where you're at, and and it's okay, and don't wait for me. If it's time for you to go, like you don't deserve to suffer, not even 1 second. And pretty much told him like, look, I'm going to take care of Mom. Like, you don't have to worry. I'm on my way home already. But if it's time for you to go, like, don't wait for me. Like, that's the last thing that I want, you know? And then I broke down, like completely broke down. I've never, ever broke down. And this was a voice message, you know? So my mom's shared it with him. And then, before I came home, like, he was already gone.
Thank you for sharing that, man. It's fucking powerful.
It was a deep journey, and a lot of transformations that happened because of it. You know, that's the first time that I actually been deeply confronted with death in the most extreme way, you know. For me, at least, it was by far the most traumatic experience that I had. And it started here in Bali, you know. And like, I mean, also, I've never broke down like this ever before. And I was very grateful to have a very good support team and my friend around me, and that just helped me, you know. I was like on the floor sobbing like a little baby, you know.
What has that experience taught you?
Well, life can be over in a split second, you know. So the people that you love, tell them that you love them, you know. The things that are not aligned, the things that are actually like draining us and exhausting us, and they don't make us feel alive, like just remove them.
Yeah.
Like, why you're holding on to things that are really, not supportive and serving you in your life.
Yeah.
Like, we have only like such a small amount of time to live.
Yeah.
Like, we might as well make the best out of it,
Sure, totally. So I love this because, it's funny. I think maybe 10 years ago I got a tattoo that says, it's in French, but like, if you had 6 months to live, what would you do with it? You know? And very much living at that time in that mindset, like I really in my 20s lived a very much live in the moment and enjoy every day and like traveling the world and playing music and like just fucking going for it,
Yeah.
And then personally I had a big health crash in 2016 where I like my body broke down and I had to like just leave everything and like try to still keep some work and some music, but like just like went full like fasting and raw vegan and celibate and abstinent and all the things, the pendulum swing. And so, I understand this idea of living in the moment, because I've definitely done that. And I still do to many ways. I like day by day, I just take it. But one thing I've been like exploring recently is how do we pendulate or like balance this idea of, living in the moment, but also building for the future and creating a life that takes consistency over time, maybe years. So how do you approach that?
I guess the German structure helps, the mindset of like...
Another stereotype.
No, not at all. I think the idea, what I had to learn, and thank God to my coach, he said one thing, he's like, structure gives you freedom. And I was like, what do you talk? Because I had so much structure when I was younger, playing professional basketball,
Sure.
all these business, but there was no free time really.
Yeah.
From the morning to evening, I know exactly what's going to happen,
Yeah.
And then I created this aversion towards structure.
Yeah.
And
Went
systems.
Full
and all
Ubud, just flow.
Yeah, like, and then, and I was like, what do you mean, like, structure gives me freedom?
Yeah.
And obviously makes so much sense now.
Yeah.
Like, of course, if I have these things structured through and I know, like, at 4 p.m. I can do whatever I want, then I can very easily combine these two things, get my shit done, and then, like, okay, I have my free flow.
Yeah.
If you have that structure for a longer period of time, then it's like, well, for the next few months, I don't need to work because, there's just everything is set up, the systems are there, like, it's just basically a well-oiled machine now.
Yeah.
So it changed my relationship with structure again, which I found very helpful.
Yeah. It's funny because for me, I've always been someone who's very good at lots of things and very high output and very high energy. So I can do a lot, and I usually I'm the guy who kind of like takes on a lot. There's a project and I'll just do everything, and so maybe a part of that is just the habit of getting in the habit of doing that. But what I found was at a certain point, there's only so much I can do without burning out, and then there's only so much, let's say, a business can grow, or actually I can create all these different things I want to do, like doing a breathwork teacher, like training, and then doing the musical, and touring around with that, and also doing my own one-on-one work and coaching and group work, and then also doing like my own music, and recording with, and all these different things that I really want to do.
Yeah.
And if I'm sitting editing clips for 4 hours every day, which isn't my zone of genius, I can do it, but it's not my zone of genius, then like I'm not going to get to do all these things that I actually really want to do. So a big lesson has been this idea of the structure and the systems to so that the freedom can be created to spend in these zones of genius, So what does an average kind of, we'll say, week look like, or how would you spend your week at the moment?
There's a couple of different things. One, it's my personal coaching consulting business.
Yeah.
So either it's my clients or, acquisition or whatever, content creation, blah, blah, blah. Like there's a lot of things that I don't really like to do.
Sure.
But I know they're important.
Sure.
Like when we go back to the zone of genius, it's like having these one-on-one conversations and pushing and provoking someone and seeing these patterns and recognizing these patterns. It's like, well, wait a second, why do you say it this way so many times?
Yeah. Yes.
Like that's my zone of
pulling
genius.
the thread.
Yeah.
Seeing what unravels.
And then pretty much just compartmentalizing my day and my week, you know. And then one thing that I love doing is creating a flavor of the day. Like let's say Monday is just, I know it's a lot of accounting, it's a lot of like finances, blah, blah, blah. Then it's like, okay, that flavor of the day will be that.
Chocolate.
No. More like that's just like being very dialed in, structured, like
Sure,
detailed and whatnot. Another day is like, well, today I just want to be very social.
Yeah.
And if I know like, okay, Friday is my social day, Friday is the day where I'm like being cheeky and whatnot, then that's my flavor of the day. Then my whole day is kind of like going through this energy, which is pretty fun.
Yeah.
And it brings a new element to like how can we approach these days.
I love that. Love that as a concept.
Yeah.
So coming back to this idea of provoking people.
Yeah.
Okay. Why does that get you going so much?
For two reasons. One, I feel like I have an opportunity and I give someone else an opportunity to really show me their real face.
Sure.
Because if we push and provoke someone, they're to a certain degree they feel a little bit pushed into a corner. And obviously this is all happening with a lot of love, right?
Yeah, there's a safe container, respect.
So what happens if someone is pushed into a corner, they have to take their mask off because all of a sudden it's like, it's a real thing here, you know? Someone's calling me out, someone's pushing me literally a little bit into a corner if you're more like in a dating type romantic, situation. And that just allows me to explore this person on a way more authentic, real, a way more authentic and real version of them.
Yeah.
So that's one piece, which I love. And two, when we bring back this coaching perspective, it's like when someone is out of their comfort zone, that's like where the real magic happens. So sometimes we want to like almost proactively bring someone out of their comfort zone rather than always be in this, as they call it in psychology, like this now I forgot the name of it, controlled exposure therapy. Where like in a very controlled manner, you want to expose them to like a certain fear or, it's like, no, we're just going to pull the trigger straight away. And it's like, shock the system, and that shocking the system is actually a very powerful tool, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's cool. We do, I think I was telling you before about this embodied creator workshop that we do. And we created this thing called the shadow improv method, which is basically, it's getting people to like, so the example would be like, let's say someone who identifies as being a people pleaser. Okay. And it's looking at why are you a people pleaser? So usually it's because at some point they realized or were told that being selfish or being like a narcissist or full of yourself or arrogant is bad. So then they want to do anything, they want to avoid doing anything that even resembles looking like that, selfish, because maybe they had a parent who said you're a bad person if you're selfish, like don't be so selfish, So now they, even when it comes to doing things like respecting their own time or setting boundaries, they just don't do it because they don't want anyone to think they're selfish because that would be very shameful. So what we get them to do is we get them to actually, instead of playing like a normal person, we get them to really go full on into playing like arrogant, like maybe like an influencer or something who doesn't only, or like a government official who only cares about taking from the land or something crazy like this, where they get to really play out this shadow and they realize that, oh, I'm not being selfish or arrogant by saying no to a party that I don't want to go to. Yeah. That's arrogant, so they actually get to feel in their body what the difference is. Yeah. And I think exposing people in that way to these parts that maybe they've shadowed or like avoided is another way to really just kind of expand that behavioral thing. So question, if you were to, let's say with me, if you were to try and like bring through something like provoke me, we'll say, or like to find out more about me in this way, what might be some questions that you could ask?
You know what? That's not even how I approach it. It's not like I have specific questions. It's more like once I pick something up, then I poke.
Gotcha.
It's not like I proactively try to like figure out ways how can I get this person like uncomfortable right now.
Yes.
It's like, no, that needs to happen in the moment. Okay. And I was like, well, wait a second, but this doesn't make sense. So you're completely saying two different things here. What do you actually,
Yeah.
I was like, what do you mean? Are you calling me out here right now? Like,
so spotting the misalignment in maybe two different parts that are active. Yeah. Okay. Well, full permission if you hear anything to bring
I can't wait.
like a hunter in the bush waiting. What's that? And so you mentioned like working a lot with women as well, and you said that there was a degree of safety that they would feel. Why do you think that is? That let's say a lot of women would be drawn to working or even just connecting with you.
Yeah, I mean, one, it has a lot to do with the way I was raised. I mentioned to you briefly before, I was raised in a love bubble. You know, I was spoiled. I'm an only child, and I was spoiled with so much love and time and presence. I never had a fight with my parents. I never saw my parents fight. And, you know, after my mom and my father passed, like, I asked her, like, have you ever fought?
Yeah.
And she's like, no. Now, have there been disagreements sometimes? Yeah, absolutely. But they were handled in the most respectful way, how, like, boundaries have been expressed and, like, respected.
Yeah.
That it was never really, like, shouting or anything like that,
Yeah,
you know? So I just grew up in an environment where these type of ways of relating with each other were just, like, very normal.
Yeah.
And I think to a certain degree, man or woman, they can just feel that.
Yeah.
You know, and since unfortunately there's at least when you listen to a lot of women, there's like they're not really a lot of good men out there that can hold them.
Sure.
You know, and I think when they find someone that is a little bit more integrated, that has a little bit of their own foundation and stability, and they feel like, okay, this person can actually hold me, so I can open up and like just get it out of my system. You know, then they do that.
Sure.
You know, and I have so many examples of women. Like, I'm in Sydney and I'm in a restaurant, and this woman wanted to take a photo of us because she was the owner, and it's like for her Instagram account, right? So before she looked through the lens, she looked into my eyes for a second, and then right after she comes to me, I don't know why, but like I never do these things, but for some reason, before I looked through the lens, I just felt like I want to open up to you and tell you everything about me. So I was like, all right, let's have a chat. So then we go to the beach and we have a conversation, and she had like a very traumatic relationship with her guy to an extent that she couldn't hold or touch anyone. I was like, what do you mean you can't touch? You know, of course. And I gave her my hands like this, you know, just super inviting. She started shaking. You know? So then I just hung out with her and like worked with her for like a week or two, and then we were able to hug, you know, as a different woman. And these things in all different kinds of ways happen all the time to me.
Super interesting. And have you found that there's any shadow side to that, at being someone who's very just naturally attracting this kind of openness from people?
Like a shadow on my end?
Yeah, any maybe negative thing that you've experienced as a result before you like learn to maybe, because I'm assuming if you're in person development now, you're actively doing.
For sure. So coming back to when my father passed away, when specifically here in Ubud in Bali, when I talk to people, mainly women, and I share them the way how I was raised and with so much love and no trauma and no arguments, no fights and whatnot, there are usually 2 or 3 things that happen. One, they're getting really resentful with me. And they think I want to put myself on a pedestal, but at the end of the day, I'm just sharing like my life, you know? Or they're getting very upset and disappointed because they didn't have that life, or then they're creating that resent towards their parents and whatnot. So I stopped sharing. And
until now.
Well, it needed my dad to pass away, where I had to look into the mirror. It's like, well, where am I not aligned? Where am I not expressing my truth? And I realized that was one of these big ones. I was like, well, I'm not even sharing such beautiful thing, you know, like one of the most magical, beautiful things that I have that makes me to who I am. I stopped sharing that because I didn't want to put myself and them into a position that just can cause these type of reactions. Because that's not why I'm doing it. That's not my intention. You know?
Totally. It's interesting because like you said, almost to have some shame to a degree around having, like in the same way someone could have shame for their dad was alcoholic or their parents weren't together. For you just to have what seemed like a very normal, like healthy childhood.
Or clients that are like, they have a lot of shame around having a shitload of money. Because it's their parents' money. You know? And then they can say, but what can they do about this? It's just what it is. You know?
Totally. And so with that, right, it's funny because it's almost like the reason why a lot of people are naturally drawn to, let's say, personal development or to come to Bali, for instance, is because they had something that was unsatisfied or unhappy that drove them to look for something more, you know? So I would imagine that a lot of people who do have a very nice and normal and loving childhood maybe don't have the same level of deep trauma that pushes them later to go on the path, you know? Because naturally, like you said, like if you go around Ubud or whatever, talking to people, probably most people there, even if it looks good on Instagram, there's some fun stuff under the surface, you know?
You know what happened? and I realized this more like a couple years ago, actually, only. There was, because everything was so picture frame like, there was a time in my life where I subconsciously created drama.
Yeah.
And I was looking for relationships
Yeah.
and like toxic patterns.
Yeah.
So I can experience the other side of the spectrum of like these colors of life that were just very foreign to me. And I found myself like in terrible situations.
Yeah.
In like, you know, why the hell would I date this woman or like even accept any of these behaviors?
Yeah.
But now I know, it's like, oh shit, that's why I did it, you know, so I can understand it better and like see what that's like.
Yeah.
Because
Get on the roller coaster.
yeah.
Yeah. And how have you found now in, like, that's another question actually. Have you found in relationships then that you have naturally attracted people who gravitate, like, do you feel you get any, let's say, thrill or benefit from being able to someone who can show up in this really integrated, like, mature way for someone who maybe really needs that? Like, has that ever shown up in a relationship context?
These savior type patterns, absolutely.
Sure.
My whole, like, when I was younger, like, that's all I did.
Yeah.
You know, like, here in Bali, and I don't really use this word, but they use a lot these, like, there's a lot of broken birds. I heard this quite a lot. And I was like, wow, okay, yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
I know what they mean, right? It's like a lot of people that come here, it's like, they know this path of healing.
Yeah.
And figuring shit out, right? And in some ways, I've done this when I was younger too, like, because there was so much stability on my end. Then the women that I had, it was like, that's not what they had.
Yeah.
So then I brought this harmony and this balance a little bit back into their lives, you know, like playing the savior type role.
And that's almost like the yin and the yang. It's like disharmony and harmony combine. And like, because just to name it, like, I've definitely, like, my path has been previously receiving and having some level of self-worth and validation through being the guy who could show up like no one else, you know. And so the shadow side and how that showed up negatively in the past, in like my late teens, early 20s, was, you know, dating women who had some issues, you know, some big issues, and I was the guy who could show up. Also, even when I'd be traveling, I would attract women who, or even just I'd be hanging out in like the staff house we'd have 12 staff living, and I'd be sitting up till 3 a.m. in the kitchen with one or two of the girls talking about how much drama with the boyfriend again, breaking up and again together. And I'd go to bed going, I'm fucking exhausted. Why am I doing this? Like, why am I sitting there? But it was like addictive. There was an addiction in being the savior, you know, and because it was like I got to feel powerful and needed and worthy. And it was only later in recognizing that it's like, oh, maybe that actually isn't healthy. And particularly if it's being expressed unconsciously, then it's coming out in these shadowy ways. However, what I found was that in stepping into more of a personal development container where there's boundaries, there's a time commitment, okay, only this time, and maybe one message WhatsApp or something. And then there's like a payment and there's an exchange. Now the exchange is not you tell me your stuff and give me the backstory and I receive worthiness. Actually, now it's like a financial exchange, you know, or, you know, time exchange. So now I'm no longer actually basing my self-worth off it. And I believe I can actually show up in more integrity, you know?
Okay. So you said the self-worth before was just like playing that role and giving them that moment to really opening up, right?
Yeah.
And now that self-worth is connected to the monetary exchange?
No. So like now the self-worth is not dependent on something external for the most part.
But, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Understood.
Was that a nearly provocative moment?
No. I was just wondering because it wasn't clear to me.
No, for sure. Like, as in, before it was unconscious. Before it was like I was doing it, but I didn't know why.
Yeah.
And then after, I'm like, oh, I see how in some way I'm trying to make myself feel powerful and worthy by doing things for people outside. Yeah. But as a result, crossing my own boundaries. And actually, I didn't really want to do it. Whereas now it's in a more healthy exchange.
Yeah.
Where actually, instead of looking outside, I'm getting high on my own supply, if you like, you know? Yeah. And then if I have extra pieces where I can help someone, it's it's a nice bonus, but I'm not dependent on it. And therefore, I'm also not looking for people to heal, and the bigger trauma, the better, because then I get to feel even more worthy. You know, it's like I actually, and this is like, again, one of the shadows of the savior type is like, almost unconsciously then seeking out people who need it even more. And I need to do this because if I don't do it, no one can do it. And it's like this taking on of someone else's stuff, which is like, actually, if I'm going to show up truly in integrity for someone, what's the best way I can serve them? And it's usually going to be in a way that like I'm not attached. I'm empowering them. I don't believe that they need me to heal and that I need to show up. It's like, actually, you got all the tools you need. I'm here if you need me. Let's chat, you know? And I'm willing to support you, but I'm also going to keep giving it back to you. You can do it. Here you go. You got the tools. Instead of like, I'm going to show up now and create a situation where they're almost kind of dependent on me almost.
Yeah, that's one of these things I found a lot with my clients in the past, that there's a little bit of a dependency that can very quickly be created. So it's the responsibility of us to make sure that this is not happening. You know, sometimes you have to leave them a little bit alone, you know.
Yeah.
My client from Dubai, he was, you know, he's like, I need to let go of my business partner, but I'm not quite sure, and like a lot of question marks, and then helped him to really like, see like, okay, yeah, it's clear. Truth, right? and then the next day he wanted to have this conversation with him, and then he sent me this long voice message and here are my points, and I gave him all the frameworks and I like how to facilitate that. And then it's like, well, can we jump on another quick like 5-minute phone call before he has a conversation? And I just didn't respond because I wanted him to do it on his own, like rather than depending on me. And actually it worked out perfectly fine, you know, much better than like if I would have
mothering him almost, you know. Yeah. Totally. And that's it. It's like there's almost needs to be, like I said, a trusting that this person can do it, you know. And at a certain point, I'm not serving them anymore. You know, this actually happens a lot in like facilitating breathwork, where we might have a group of 15 people, we'll say, and then we've got like, you know, 8 or 10 facilitators. But particularly with the newer ones, and particularly if someone has a pattern of savior, maybe there's one girl who comes every week and is crying a lot, you know. And of course you see crying maybe for the first time and you go, oh wow, they're crying, wow, I need to help them, you know. So go, and like sometimes that can be really authentic, you know. But what I learned actually quite soon is that some people have developed a behavior or a strategy for having their needs met. So if they want help and support, they might learn that crying is a way that gets met. Or maybe it's by being really funny. You know, that's actually how I get love and support, is by being the comedian. So we develop a strategy or behavior that allows us to do it, which is actually propping or masking the emotion or the lack of something that's underneath.
Comedy and laughing could be a mask itself, though.
Totally, yeah.
Right?
Totally.
There's a lot of people, they hide their insecurities and their discomfort in jokes.
Yes.
And like in comedy, you know?
It's like shadowy humor, totally. And it's like, particularly like being from Ireland, we have a lot of jokes like this where it's like passive aggressive in a way. Like I'm only joking, but it's not, you know, there's actually a deeper.
I believe every joke has an element of truth in there.
Totally.
Right?
That's why it's funny.
Exactly. So if you're like joking and like kind of calling me out in a jokey way, then that call out is like, you still mean it.
Yes.
You know, you're just not, it's almost like sometimes you're not willing enough to just say it straight to me.
Yeah.
So you put it into this disguise of like, oh, let's put some comedy around it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's, okay, so this is an interesting one, because I noticed in, like, for instance, when I was in school, there was times that, like, some periods I went through where there was like some bullying, you know, and I found it very hard to.
So you were bullying others?
I was being bullied, and I found it very hard to come back to that, because, like, people were making jokes and laughing, but if I got angry, then like, we're only joking, you know, and it's very difficult to. And it's like almost like needing to be a better comedian and be better at finding out their weakness and making a joke about it, so that people can laugh that way instead of this way, you know. And it's such an interesting, like, if I remember that being quite a trap, actually. It was feeling like traps, because I couldn't just say it like it was, because then there would almost be like some shame around, oh, you can't take a joke, you know, even though it's not a joke, you know. So super interesting as a reflection of that, like there being truth in it, and that's actually what can sting. And this is what's interesting. So with this musical I talked about before, it's a basically comedy, but a lot of satire and a lot of speaking to these shadows, like the creepy guru who wants to sleep with everyone, and the life coach who doesn't care about his clients and only takes their money, and the influencer who cares only about their appearance, and all these things. Like, so, but what we do is we create archetypes and characters instead of like actually picking real people and look at that guy's hair, look at what she did. Like, it's more general. So someone can like see themselves in it and lean in and go like, oh, maybe that's me, but like I'm not singling them out and going like maybe some of these Instagram accounts you might have seen, like where they take specific people and like joke about it and stuff. It's like it can be good for a cheap laugh, but it also like there's a shadow side, as we said.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are the core things you believe that invite safety in a relationship or in, let's say, a coaching container? What allows people to feel safe when they come to you to share these deepest, darkest things, if you were to try and quantify it in some way?
I would say emotional maturity and stability.
What does that mean?
That means, like, even if you have a little bit of a more intense conversation, that you're not being carried away by your emotions. And you can actually have that pillar straight in the ground. You're going to be immovable.
Yes.
You know? So you can hold that frame for the other person to really open up.
Yeah.
That just creates safety in itself, you know, for
So
them to go deeper.
So it's almost like someone is sharing something and it brings up an emotion or a feeling in you, but you don't let it take over the conversation.
Well, correct. Yeah.
Or at least you're able to like name it and put it there instead of like...
I think it's more like an element of empathy.
Yeah.
And consideration, like what's really happening on their end right now,
Yeah.
and like playing into that and allowing them to really explore whatever it is they just brought to the surface.
Yeah.
Because that in itself, it's such a big release for people. You know, if they start talking about it, it's a powerful way of releasing like blocked energies and whatnot.
Sure. Yeah.
And allowing people to do that and bring in these elements of active listening and whatnot, like it's sometimes that's all that's needed. You know, they just need someone who's like really present. Presence is another one.
Yeah.
Which is super powerful to have that presence. To give someone that gift of full presence is insanely powerful. Yeah, I think those are two really big ones. I think probably the biggest one is presence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and also like presence, active listening is pretty big as well, and then the emotional maturity, stability.
Yeah, but if I really have to break it down to just one thing, the most important thing is just presence.
Sure,
you
because
know,
the others kind of stem from that.
Right?
You can't do active listening without presence. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
So when we talk then about capacity, right? So the ability for, you know, let's say someone is talking and they're saying something and maybe it's bringing up a trigger, but like you said, the ability to have the capacity to not be overwhelmed by that and to still stay with them so that you can actively listen and repeat back what they're saying is super crucial for that as well.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like you've developed that capacity to deeply listen and not get pulled away in your own thoughts or emotions?
I was raised into this.
Fucking lucky bastard.
Yeah, I know.
I'm going to get really resentful now and emotional.
It's okay. You wanna explore your emotions?
Yeah, sure, totally.
No, it's really like, for the longest time I didn't know, and to a certain degree it also needed my dad to pass away for me to understand these pieces of that he's given to me.
Yeah.
Because, you know, he had teams, he was leading teams, like the whole neighborhood, everyone, he was kind of like a
pillar,
the pillar, like the old man in the village.
Yeah, the elder.
The elder, yeah. And I didn't know that. But once he passed away, how like everyone around us, from co-workers to like neighbors and whatnot and old friends, like how they all reacted.
Yeah.
Was quite eye-opening to me to another level. It's like, wow, that was the type of person that he was, and that was a piece that I didn't see before. Yeah. Sorry, where were we going with that question?
Or we just wandering, just exploring. No, we were talking about capacity, how you developed your capacity to hold that, and you were saying your dad. So
that's one piece. I think the other piece is my professional basketball background, because one, you play in a team.
Yeah.
You know, so and if you want to play on an international level
Which
and represent the country, which I was,
Yeah.
then that means like you have to develop so many other elements of your own personality, your character, in order to perform on such a elite level. No, it's not just, you know, a shoot around like on a street ball court, you know.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more than that. Like my whole life was dedicated to basketball.
Yeah.
From morning to evening. Like sometimes I wasn't in school for 6 to 8 weeks because we're traveling around with the national team.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
And then playing in a team, it also helped me to understand certain things of like winning and losing.
Yeah.
It helped me to understand like, okay, there are sacrifices, there are compromises, there are dedications that are necessary.
Yeah.
It means also like, okay, this is his moment to shine.
Yeah.
This is how he can contribute. Like for me, it's time to like step back a little bit because like I'm not the guy who shoots the threes and makes all the points. Like give me the best player out of the team, out of the other game. I'll take him out of the game.
Yeah.
You know, but like understanding how can we actually support each other in this team dynamic in order to win a game, because we all have the same intention. Like we want to win the game.
Yeah.
You know, so I think these pieces were insanely important as well.
Yeah. And also the importance of being able to like lose or be close to losing and maintain that resilience to keep going, you know, to turn things around.
Yeah. Or actually lose, you know, and like you got to come back the next day and like go back to practice and like have a game next week, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, how long do you want to ponder on your losses, or do you just take these lessons that are there and like try to implement them immediately?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bouncing back. I love that. How has that like mentality and mindset influenced how you approach like life and business today?
Everything.
Yeah.
It's everything. I always say like a lot of these analogies and the way how I approach life and look at life, a lot of it comes from the way how I learned to approach playing basketball on a high elite level, I guess. You know? So there's a lot of analogies and ways how I used everything that I've learned in basketball and implement it into life, you know, and into relationships and into business and, you know, into communication. Because as a captain of the national team, I was also the bridge between coaches and players and delegations. And like, you know, so like there was a lot of different things to handle at different times. And I was young. I was like 14 at a time, you know. So yeah.
Yeah. Super interesting.
Yeah.
What is a topic or an area that's been really like in this moment you've really been like researching or exploring? Maybe it's like audiobooks or courses or something you're doing on like a new topic that's like intriguing and exciting.
It's working with men.
Yeah.
So I worked so much with women in the past, a lot of in a one-on-one container or in group coachings. And then a lot of friends, they came to me and was like, when do you start working with men? Like, you know, we don't have good men around and like all these things. And then obviously the reflections that they give me, like how they look at me and whatnot, which is a very beautiful exercise in itself, to ask like your closest female friends, like, how do you look at me? But not just the pretty things, like tell me the things that you know, as well. And then I really got excited to create a program and start working way more with men to help them to become a more healthy, integrated, masculine version of themselves, you know? So that's super exciting.
It's actually been a like kind of similar journey for myself, where when I first started like 3 years ago doing facilitation and coaching, it was mostly women turning up. So I was like, well, okay, well, if we're going to go down a route, then this feels like more natural. And I even worked with a friend who's a business partner. We made a course called Heart-Centered Sales Funnels. And it was like helping women create like a basic sales funnel, like super simple structure, but like doing it in a very like, you know, feminine kind of way with also the masculine structure, you know, and then also the clients that were coming were, you know, not worthy and not feeling enough and all this kind. And I was like, it was just very naturally coming to me. I think also because this deeper level of empathy and presence and listening. And at a certain point, I also started to realize that like the traits and the things that were leading to this like natural drawing of these people to me, these women to me, was like, oh, actually men also need that as well, because they need to also apply that in their lives. So it kind of naturally at a certain point just kind of shifted to like more of that. And it's kind of a bit of a balance, like it comes and goes, but it is funny how the same things, the same reasons that maybe are drawing in the past more women is also required, you know, like these things, presence, active listening, emotional resilience, you know, it's like, it's valued and important both on a, you know, having a presence so that people can be vulnerable, and also teaching it, and also like supporting people to foster more of that in themselves. Yeah.
So what's the big difference for you coaching or working with men and women? Because I find them very different.
Totally. Just thinking through like tick, 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 tick. My experience has been with men. It's mostly around okay, and again, this is just based off a subset of people that I've worked with, so this is not a generalization to the entire world. But I've found that the women that I've worked with have a lot more self-awareness, and they're more in tune with like their emotions and the different things that are happening in their life. And sometimes what they need is just a bit more like someone telling them how it is, and like taking all the different pieces that are spinning around in the air and just going bam. So what I'm hearing is this, and therefore it sounds like this is what you need to do. And they're like, oh, holy fuck. Yes. So taking all the noise and making into one clear stream, and then it's just clear.
Yeah.
And it's not taking away or saying that any of the many spinning plates and ideas in the sky are wrong or there's anything bad. Like that gets to be there, but then there's just a clear thread. And I think that's just something that has been reflected to me that I do well, which is like taking the abstract and making it concrete and grounded. And that's like with writing those songs or creating that show and stuff. It's like taking like these, like what is truth? Well, let's write a song about it, you know what I mean? And then it's like people can relate to it. And then with men, I've found it's a lot more, actually the opposite. It's kind of like getting them more in touch with their emotions and their body, you know, on a somatic level. And again, that's the kind of work I do. Like, yes, there's mindset work, but even within that, I've found because I've got such a deep like practice and understanding of the nervous system and how actually at the root of most of the thoughts that are happening is some kind of somatic incomplete reflex or memory or emotion that is driving the show. It's kind of like the mind is the child and the body is the adult. So we could have the best mindset in the world. Like, I'm going to work out and go on a diet, you know, in the mind. And we set in the calendar and we do everything with the mindset. But then as soon as the first trigger comes up, the body goes, Like the child's like, I want to go to the shop and have ice cream. And the parent goes, no. And that's it. There's no more conversation. Now, if the child convinces the parent again and again, please, 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 eventually the parent goes, okay, we'll do it this time, you know? But ultimately it's about teaching, I think, guys are that like emotions, like, and tapping into the emotions can actually be a superpower, you know, getting in touch with that so that there can be emotional resilience and presence. Because I believe that the reason why we're brought out of that presence is because of a trigger that we haven't looked at. You know, and because we don't want to look at it, it becomes a shadow. It becomes like something that's working in the background, like a big program on your laptop that's draining.
Give me an example out of your life.
Okay.
Because I told you before on the podcast, is like, we have a lot of like coaching, superficial, like politically correct, like type of bullshit.
Sure.
I find at least in the coaching industry that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is boring.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, so make it more like, give me an example.
Of what? What specifically?
What do you like when we have these like out of your life, not a client,
yes,
where these like blockages that you express, these like, you know, moments of like, well, the mind says this, but the body says that, and we're kind of like continue to follow the body rather than what the mind says.
Sure. Okay. So a good example would be, for instance, like, I would say still sometimes, but in the past I used to have like a lot of fondness for sugar. So almost because before I was like always never able to have dairy since I was a kid. Like I was always like allergic, so I could never have like the birthday cake. So then when I came to Bali and they had like vegan desserts everywhere, I'm like, sorry?
Poor kid, you never had a birthday cake.
I survived, thankfully. But then coming to Bali and they have like vegan cake everywhere, like epic. And I'm like, holy shit. So like I would come on holiday and I'd go everywhere and just have all the treats and then leave after 3 weeks. And then when I came to live here, you know, 3 years ago, I'm like, let's go. And it just became a habit, you know? And what I realized actually after some deep self-inquiry was one of the ways that as a child I learned to buffer emotion was by eating a lot of sugar. Like I used to have in the week, like no control and be in this like really intense daycare center, which was like basically like a military camp, you know? And on a Friday, I would not have to go and I could go home and then my grandparents would look after me and they didn't give a fuck. So they were just like, let me do what I want. Yeah. So I go for the biscuit thing and I eat all the fucking biscuits, you know? And it was just like, Yeah. So what I learned was that how my nervous system learned to regulate and to soothe these emotions that I had no way of controlling or expressing
Yeah.
was by buffering it with overeating of sugar. So what I used to find was like naturally during the day I wake up and I'm fasting or I'm, you know, really going on my routine and everything good. And it was in the evening, that's when it would really start to come up, when the willpower was lower and maybe I have some stuff that I hadn't processed or I'm moving through some stuff. And I even got to a point where I know I'm going to do this and eat this thing and I'm not hungry and I don't want it, but I still go there and I drive 10 minutes to go and then eat it. It's crazy, fucking crazy. And even though I knew it was wrong and I knew I didn't want to do it and I knew I wasn't hungry and I knew I'd probably feel sick and hate myself after, still did it, you know? And that was an example where the body's like, we're going this way now, you know? Because this is what I've learned. This is the strategy that I've learned to survive.
Yeah.
And so until we rewire that and actually like look at and express and repattern what's underneath that, it's going to continue to manifest. And this is why cognitively I can understand that like maybe that ex-partner is not good for me, but I keep going back because it just feels so good. And in the moment that the mind can then be fed thoughts that, oh, but actually maybe they did change. Maybe they are good. Oh, maybe I thought it was wrong. And then after the crash, you know, again. So this is where, again, the addiction to these chemicals and the body, like, or whatever it's learned to use or whatever feels like home or familiar. So maybe if I grew up in a home environment that was very abusive and angry, a lot of anger, a lot of like shouting, that feels like home. So now I try to find experiences that feel like home. And if it feels like very calm and loving, it's like, this is fucking boring. This doesn't feel like home. This feels weird. This doesn't feel safe. I don't know this. Let me go back to the crazy one.
Okay.
You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's so much better illustrated now, you know?
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. And what I'm curious about is, you know, you mentioned you have this podcast you started and you're talking about some edgy topics.
Yeah.
So what would be one of them? I'd love to hear like a recap of one of the podcasts you've done.
Sure. Like I'll give you a couple of these topics and then we can just explore whichever one you want.
The candy shop.
We had sex on the first date.
Okay.
We had a cheating.
Aha.
We had one specifically, can breakups ever be mutual? And then yesterday we had, can men be considered hoes?
Hose.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
So which one would you like?
I like
to explore?
cheating.
Cheating?
Cheating's a good one.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that kind of ties into what I talked about before.
Yeah.
With the body driving, because I think most people like ultimately desire to be in some form of integrity.
Yeah.
You know, what I say is what I do, is what I think is who I am.
So have you been cheated
on? Have I been cheated on? No, I haven't.
Have you?
Not that I know of.
Have you been cheating on someone else?
No.
Oh, good guy.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Proper nice guy.
Yeah, nice. So if someone would cheat on you,
Yeah.
how would you react?
Yeah. Okay. Well,
you're in a relationship. Let's
sure.
set the container,
Paint the
right?
picture, yeah.
You're in a beautiful relationship. I mean, beautiful, whatever that means, right?
Sure, yeah.
But you're in a relationship, long term, it's committed.
Yeah.
And then at some point, either you find out or she tells you, it's like, hey, look, I had this night with this guy yesterday or last week or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, what's your reaction?
Okay. Well, if it's a short-term thing.
Like, no, it's a committed thing.
No, as in like it happened a few days ago.
Okay.
It didn't happen a year ago and now they tell me.
Yeah.
Because that would be a bigger breach of trust,
Okay.
I think.
Gotcha.
So I think my own process would be, you know, I'd imagine there'd be some kind of self-worth piece that might come alive around like, you know, a story that could come alive. And again, it's interesting to explore this now from where I'm at now versus maybe 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I think what would happen now is like, my sense is that there's a strong enough sense of self-worth, like internally, that I'd know that it was like not that much to do with me. It probably could actually. Okay, so that's one thing. I'd probably have maybe a story around like, oh, maybe is it my fault? Maybe I'm not good enough as a person. But I think it would be more like looking at what could I have done differently in terms of behaviors that maybe like how could I have been responsible or caused this in some way? Not like saying it's all my fault, but questioning, did I co-create this in some way? You know, or is it, okay, here's me on this side of the spectrum, here's them on the other side. Where does the fault lie? Is it fully my side, fully their side 100%? Or is it like 80 them, 20 me? Because for instance, they didn't feel seen or connected in the relationship because I've been so busy with all these things I've been doing.
Does it matter though? If it's 80-20 or 50-50 or like 20-80, like at the end of it, does it really matter?
In principle, no, but I think it
Okay.
would be still like, I'm the kind of person who always looks for like, where could I have possibly done something wrong here? Not as like trying to take on all the responsibility, but just to continue to grow and understand and
Okay,
learn.
so that's the reflection part.
Sure, yeah.
What about the reaction though?
The reaction. Huh. So the reaction would probably be, there'd be obviously a feeling of betrayal, I think.
I hope so.
Yeah, sure, yeah. I think that even if it was like 90% my fault, I still think at a principle it would be very, very difficult to continue. Because it would just feel so out of integrity with my values, you know? And I'm sure there'd actually be a part of me that would maybe criticize myself for having those strong values and would want to continue that. And we can, I used to have more of a thing of like, I can change, I can do more, I can do better, which is the not enough pattern, So that used to be a lot more of like, even if it was like really someone else's fault, I can do more. Like, what else can I take on from this?
It's like, how can this person finally love me?
Yeah. And like, even if it doesn't go as far as cheating, there can be like emotional, like, or energetic slippages where like they're not fully in, or there's like a wandering, and there's this like cat mouse game where there's like a chasing. This person's kind of a more avoidant, and then there's a leaning in. So I think, as I said, at a principle, I would have to say game over. I would still seek to, like, I wouldn't just say, fuck that person, that's all their fault. I would still try to seek, I believe, quite quickly and see if there was any fault in me. Like, I had in one or two situations before where it seemed like to me that this was all this other person's fault, in a argument or in a situation that emerged. And it was only when I really like tuned in and sat down, like, I see how I didn't communicate my needs. I see how I was overriding my truth to please, and it resulted later on in this. So I think there's always growth, and I think it's just a symptom and a byproduct of something. And I'd actually probably be quite curious, like, what is it in them that drove them to that? What was the unmet need in them? And why did they not think, for instance, that communication was available 5 steps earlier? You know? Why were they not able to say, hey, I don't feel met sexually? Or maybe it's something that actually, like you said, the thrill of chasing edgy or risky situations is actually how they get their kicks, and that I missed that, and that's actually a good learning for me, because I realize I'm attracting people who are, having this edgy side when actually I'm seeking stability and safety. So that would be kind of my process, I think. What was your answer to that?
Well, to me, if my partner cheats on me, like, it's over.
Sure.
And everyone has different ideas, but I feel like if we have that breach of trust, I will never be able to trust you fully ever again. How can I? Like, one of these most important, crucial moments of like keeping a sacred union alive, you didn't value that enough. Now, would I like to understand why and how, and like all these reflective parts and like having a conversation about it? Yeah, absolutely. Like, fine. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, look, this is all nice to hear, and I see how I have contributed to this. And obviously we do have contributed to everything. Like, all the problems that we have, what's the common denominator? It's us. It doesn't matter what kind of problem it is. There's only one constant, and that's always us. But that doesn't take away the fact that like there was a breach of trust that's completely out of my values and my principles and what I want to create and foster in my intimate relationships, or even like not intimate relationships. That's like I cannot look away, and I do not look away, because I feel like I'm just moving away from my own sense of integrity.
Yes, totally.
So it's done.
So
on top of it, sorry to add
no,
this,
it's great, yeah.
when a woman cheats, in 99.9% of the cases, the emotions and the heart is involved in a much, much more intense way than it is for a guy. So like, we can't just ignore that fact by itself either.
There's one of those studies, I think, where they had, I think it was there's a book called The Evolution of Desire, and it talks about like have you read it or yeah, it's super interesting. So it's like a lot of the science behind relationships and relating and men and women, and what like attracts people to certain types of people and why. And also a part of that is like why people cheat. And it explored this idea of like how for men, actually from an evolutionary perspective, like, of course, like passing on their genetics is something that's the highest importance, and they've got very little control over. So the strategy they do is by protecting and keeping one woman, you know, and that for the woman, actually, she could have many guys, but it's, you know, she wants to choose the highest quality mate, you know. So they would say about how they would have this experiment where they would set up this thing where, you know, a man, let's say a man or a woman, and they see their partner going to a hotel on a video camera with like another lover, and they go to this hotel. They don't see what's inside, but they see on the CCTV. And then after, they have the opportunity to confront them in the hotel lobby. And they said they were looking at how do they react, okay? And they said, so for the man, the first thing he said is, did you sleep with him? You know? Did you have sex with him? You know? And for the woman, what did she say?
Go for it.
Do you love him? Or do you love her? You know? Because for the woman, it was almost like, even if the man had an affair, as long as he was still fully committed to her, she had, you know, the protection, the security, the resources. Yeah, it didn't really matter, you know? But for the guy, if another man had impregnated his woman and then he raises that child as his own, that's not a good evolutionary strategy. So super interesting, like that as a concept of like how for the woman, it was so much more about love. And for the man, it was so much more about the physical intimacy part of it.
Yeah, we need different things.
Totally.
You know, men and women just need totally different things.
Yeah.
And it's a funny thing because like I love talking
I'm actually a woman now, by the way. I just decided.
You just decided?
Yeah.
You really want to go down that path?
No.
It's like such an attention seeker. It's like love and sex and relationships and intimacy. I feel like those are such juicy conversations.
Yeah.
And the difference that men and women will be actually looking for and what we desire and want. And yet we kind of like, I think men understand this much better, what women want. And, you know, it's like, okay, protecting, providing, taking care of them, making them feel home and safe and like whatnot, right?
I disagree. I think that a lot of men don't know what women want. Like really want. Like, you know, of course there's the superficial stuff, but like I believe that, like, again, you could say your upbringing, but like I think that, like, for me personally and for a lot of people I know, that's only a penny that's dropped really recently on an embodied level, really knowing how to show up and like support and provide for someone. Like,
okay.
Yeah, we get to disagree. Great. Here we go.
Totally disagree, because look at the whole evolution of humanity. It was always very clear the role of the man, protecting, providing, taking care of the family, of the, you know, that has never been changed. It has always been the case.
Yes.
It's like in our DNA.
Until
it's
recently.
in our body. Yeah, but that's like part of the whole feminism movement and like, you know, empowering women and all that, which is great.
Yeah.
But like not to the extent of emasculating men.
Sure,
which
totally.
happened a lot.
Sure,
right?
yeah, of
So
course.
that's the problem. That's why a lot of men are confused. But generally speaking, men know what are the most important things that they need to take care of, like for the family.
Yeah.
There's no question about that.
Totally.
Like everyone knows that.
Yes.
They might not embody it, but they know what it is.
So this is interesting because I totally agree that evolutionary wise, it's always been the man as the provider and the protector. Okay. And what I was referring to is in modern day and in our current day, in terms of the men I know, it's not so clear because those gender roles, it's almost like for the man to do that is like considered like, it's almost considered toxic in some way. If he's trying to have, like if you say that you want a woman to only be having kids and looking after the family and at home, then it's like considered like this, you know, not respecting and empowering women, you know what I mean? And so I think like I've had one or two guests on the podcast, like they talk a lot about polarity and stuff, about how what you're speaking to is that traditional role, and that in losing that, we also lose the natural polarity and those roles and how important they are, as well as of course being able to have the other side, but not defining ourselves off like just being like effectively like gender neutral and kind of both 50-50 on every single thing, like how important it is for a man to know his role and how he actually feels purposeful from that.
Correct. And the other way around, also for a woman to know her role and like her mission and like what she's supposed to do here, you know? And how can she, this was something that came up on the podcast yesterday, how like a lot of men, what they really love and desire is a woman that's like in full support, being the cheerleader, being in full support of the man's mission and vision, you know? That's like what we need. That's like this nurturing, caring, like, you know, being the cheerleader type thing. That's like super, super important. And then what all the women said, what they want is like, yeah, of course, these emotional maturity and like taking care of them and providing and whatnot. So there's in some ways a lot of understanding, yet we don't necessarily always play those roles for each other, men and women.
Totally.
Because a lot of women don't play that role for the man either. There's like, no, I'm empowered, I'm doing my own thing, I don't need men, and like, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then men don't really take care of their roles either.
Yeah. They're like, hey, can you get dinner again tonight? You know?
Let's split the bill.
Yeah, totally. No, it's a really fascinating discussion. I'm excited to hear what future topics you bring forward on the edgy Undressed podcast. Super cool.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. You know, 6 feet, 6 figures, 6 inches.
Fuck it. Yeah, it's great marketing strategy. Yeah,
like these type of topics. Everyone has an opinion.
Sure.
You know, and it's more like really, really discovering and exploring each other's opinions and viewpoints. Mm-hmm. And rather than having these taboo topics and not having these authentic conversations about it, let's just put it all on the table and talk about it.
Yeah.
Because that's often the problem also why a lot of relationships are not really with a lot of harmony. Because one, we expect the other person to just like being able to read our minds.
Yeah.
And we are not really expressing what we actually need and desire and want.
Yeah.
And that just creates so much discrepancy between the two of us.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring it, like, to finish this off, I'm going to bring us right back around to the cheating piece, right? Because you were mentioning about, like, if a woman cheated on you, like, that's it, game over, okay? Yeah. Just to tune back into, like, that, you know, savior part that used to be more active, you know, in terms of, and again, I can relate to that as well. Let's say you knew and you could have compassion and empathy for a woman who actually never was taught how to communicate her deeper needs, okay? And actually saw her own mother in distress, and her mother, you know, cheating on her father as a way of actually coping, because if not, she would have probably committed suicide and given up. So actually she used that escape as a way to meet her own needs. And she learned that as a strategy for if shit hits the fan, and I know I have a block in my throat, I can't communicate my needs, it's not accessible, because that was never taught to me. And so now the only way I have, I believe, to survive is to go and to have this connection outside. And you knew that to be true, and you had like full empathy and compassion for that. Would you still be like, okay, it's still a no, and like love you and no? Or would you feel like, maybe I can actually work with that?
To me, this is black or white.
Yeah.
There's nothing in between.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these toxic relationships are because we don't know our values.
Yeah.
We don't know really what our boundaries are.
Yes.
So therefore we cannot enforce them.
Yes.
We cannot communicate them. We cannot enforce them. And if they've been broken, we kind of like look away the other direction and like, you know, pretend it didn't happen. That just creates more drama.
We're not tuned into truth.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I definitely hear you, and I think I'm also the same. Like, there's certain things that like even if it was in the safety of, you know, like no one else knew, and it was that kind of thing, I still feel like whatever about living with myself, with that thing of like knowing I went against my values. But the added component would be if everyone else also knows. Yeah. And then it's like,
it doesn't matter though.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And if someone would know, it puts you in an even weaker position as a man.
Exactly.
You know?
Because you've been seen as someone who is not...
Who's accepting that.
Yeah.
Who's accepting such behavior.
Yeah.
You know? And there are plenty of behaviors that women should never accept in a man either. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, you know, this is like goes both ways.
Yes.
Though now these behaviors might be different ones.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, there's like... I feel like the more we're able to set these boundaries and being very clear, like what's okay and what's not okay, the more we're actually like creating an environment and people around us that are in alignment.
And are more likely to respect those boundaries.
Of course.
Well,
and if they don't, it's like, fair enough. We're just not on the same page.
Yeah.
You know, that's okay. But it kind of also ends here then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're very privileged to be here in Bali and to have, you know, such an epic group of people around who all kind of get it. Even if they weren't born into that scenario where they have it taught to them early, they've maybe done the work to embody more of that. So
do you think a lot of people embody it here though?
Say again?
Do you think a lot of people that live here really embody what they're preaching?
I would say the majority, like if you were to look at a wide subset, I'd say no, but I still think that there's enough that at least I know that do actually live up to that. But it's only because like if you went to like a normal city and took 1,000 people, then you probably find very few who are. And then I think when you come to Bali, you get this mix of people who like are on these early stages of like doing the work and maybe even masquerading or appearing as someone who is like an expert or embodying this, but actually when you poke under the surface, it's like a house of cards coming down.
Yeah.
And then you do also have some people who have integrated, embodied, and kind of gone off on their own journey, and it's not all for the cameras, but they actually then do live it to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And I think those people then, because it's like such a ripe environment for also those kind of people, as well as for the seekers, you know, like for people who've already like integrated a lot of elements of that, it can be a very fulfilling community, like on this like different level.
For sure. Yeah. Cool.
Well, thank you very much, Sascha, for joining me on the podcast. It's been fucking an epic rabbit hole. I don't even know how long we've gone for. That's a good hour and a half. It's pretty good.
Oh, nice. Wow.
Yeah.
Longer than I thought. Awesome.
What was your favorite moment from today?
Your question of ask me what was my darkest moment here.
Uh-huh.
Because I feel like these moments of pain and darkness and whatnot, they're also, big. They're basically they're an not just they're an opportunity for growth, but they're almost like a catalyst to turn pain into power or pain into purpose and whatnot.
Yes.
And I've obviously in my own way have experienced that in ways that I haven't before. So like, and for some that might sound a little bit weird, but like him passing away, there's like two major things that I learned. One, like, like this way of him being in relationship with me, that's gone. But like, actually, he's not really dead. Yeah. Like we just talk about them right now, like, so obviously he's not dead. It's just like the form and shape has changed.
The spirit lives on.
Completely.
Yeah.
Which was a really, really big lesson for me.
Yeah.
And the other one, it just showed me, one, the gratitude that I have for him and everything that he's given to me. Yeah. And two, it kind of shined the light on the thing that I didn't really share anymore. Yeah. Which is such a beautiful thing. So, in some ways like that, him passing away also showed me a lot of beautiful things. And then my friend Hakan from Istanbul, he said one thing, is like, only when our fathers pass is when we step into real manhood. And I thought in some ways I can really resonate with that, because it now I'm the man of the house, of the family.
Totally.
Like before I was always the baby. Yeah. I was always the kid. I was always the boy. Like, it would have never changed unless he passes away.
Yes.
Because those are just the roles that we play in, So, so that question was quite powerful. So thank you.
To close this out, what's one provocative question you would like to leave the audience with that maybe they can use to reflect deeper on themselves today?
In what areas of your life do you lie the most to yourself?
That's a good one. Enjoy. Right. Thank you so much, buddy.
Cheers,
pleasure.
Buddy.